A beef between two titans of the New York music scene hits the sex trafficking and racketeering trial of Sean Diddy Combs. Why 50 Cent was brought up this week during emotional witness testimony. Combs and 50, they've been at odds for a long time. And now, one of them's facing the possibility of spending the rest of their life in federal prison, and the other is not holding back or hiding the apparent joy they find in that possibility happening with a guilty verdict.
What people are reacting to right now isn't really about a project on a streaming platform. That's just the trigger. The real story is what happens when two long-simmering egos finally lose the ability to pretend they're unbothered. When something drops into the public space that neither side fully controls, the masks slip.
To go back a long time, they have been rivals for a long time. And this week we learned that, at least from Diddy's side of things, this feud apparently went far beyond words. 50 Cent's name came up during the testimony this week of Capricorn Clark. She is a former assistant of Sean Combs who went on to become the head of marketing for his Sean John clothing brand. Clark rose successfully and professionally through the ranks of Diddy's world during her time working for him, which stretched between 2004 to 2018, so she saw a lot. Clark claimed that Diddy would threaten her, and she says he even kidnapped her in 2011. All of this matters as we build up to how 50 Cent kind of factors into what she said on the stand. Now, Capricorn Clark started working for Bad Boy after she worked for Death Row Records. Now that's surprising, since Death Row was ran by perhaps Diddy's most hated enemy, Suge Knight. Clark said that one of her good friends had a baby with Suge Knight, and that's how she knew him. And in perhaps the most shocking story from her testimony, Clark claimed that shortly after she started working for Diddy, Diddy and his security guards took her to Central Park after dark, and Diddy said, quote, "He told me he didn't know that I had anything to do with Suge Knight, and if anything happened, he would have to kill me." It is an allegation that paints Combs as someone who is ready to take a life. But as Capricorn Clark's testimony continued, she brought up another rival of Sean Diddy Combs and another allegation that he made an ominous threat of violence. Clark testified, when working for Diddy, they went to a press event at MTV and 50 Cent was there. And just wait until you hear what she says Diddy told 50's manager. 50 Cent's real name is Curtis Jackson. He rose to fame in the early 2000s. You might remember songs like In the Club. You might remember that he was the leader of the rap group G-Unit. Now, 50 grew up in Jamaica, Queens, New York. Diddy, also a New York native. He was born in Harlem, grew up in Mount Vernon, New York, just about 20 miles away. And even though they both had success in music, they both rose to fame representing the city of New York and the rap scene there, they have been longtime rivals. In 2006, 50 Cent released a diss track about Diddy. So almost 20 years ago, this goes back a long way. And in that diss track, he says, quote, "Who shot Biggie Smalls? We don't get 'em. They gon' kill us all. Man, Puffy know who hit that expletive. Man, that expletive soft." Now 50 is accusing Combs there of knowing who killed his friend, the notorious B.I.G. Christopher Wallace. Wallace and Puffy were incredibly close, but Wallace was shot and killed in a drive-by shooting in Los Angeles in 1997, and no one has ever been charged for pulling the trigger. This all happened during really the height of the East Coast-West Coast rap rivalry of the 90s, which involved Suge Knight, who we mentioned earlier. 50 Cent has also accused Diddy of orchestrating the murder of death row rapper Tupac Shakur, who died in 1996 in a Las Vegas drive-by shooting. This is Dwayne Keefe D. Davis. He was arrested in September 2023, and he is the only person facing charges related to Tupac's murder. But 50 Cent has continued to push the allegation that Sean Combs either knows something or did something for Tupac to end up dead, though Diddy has denied that. But in a 2023 Instagram post, 50 wrote, "Damn, so Pac got lined by brother love, LOL, time to lawyer up, expletive might get sticky," with a pic of Suge Knight in a car with Tupac. Diddy, who has a lot of names, Puff Daddy, Puffy, Puff, and Brother Love is one of those other names. Now from Diddy's side of things, again, he's denied having anything to do with Tupac's murder, and he's also denied having anything to do with Christopher Wallace's death, and he's denied publicly having issues with 50 Cent. Here's what Combs said when he was asked about a beef.
And the tension that's been building for years spills out in real time. This didn't come out of nowhere. For a long time, there's been a quiet standoff, not loud beef, not open warfare, but something colder, side glances, indirect comments, Moments where respect looked performative and silence carried more weight than praise. People who understand power dynamics could feel it even when nothing was being said. Then this project landed, and suddenly, history wasn't being filtered the way it usually is. Suddenly, the past wasn't neatly edited. Suddenly, the narrative didn't belong to the same hands it always had. That's when outrage started bubbling up, not just from the public, but from the people who felt exposed by implication alone. Because outrage isn't always about what's shown, sometimes it's about what might be inferred. Once that line was crossed, the feud stopped being theoretical, it stepped into the spotlight, loud and unavoidable. Every reaction after that felt less like surprise and more like confirmation that this was always waiting to happen. The interesting part is how quickly things escalated, not with facts, not with clarity, but
with 50 in a 2018 interview with the radio show The Breakfast Club, Power 105.1 FM.
Hey, yo, I don't have no beef with
I don't know why.
With Fifth. He loves me. He loves me.
Do y'all really
can't
have
see
a
it?
beef?
I mean, y'all can't see it.
No, we can't see
Y'all
it,
can't
man.
see that he loves me?
But see,
You really think that's hate?
If you look at 50's social media, you can see he has a lot of posts about Diddy. And this is what he posted the day that federal agents in Miami raided Combs' mansion ahead of his arrest on the charges that he's now on trial for. 50 Cent posted on X, "Now it's not Diddy do it, it's Diddy done. They don't come like that unless they got a case." 50 Cent also included a link to his G-Unit clothing brand in that post. While Diddy in the Breakfast Club clip said that 50 Cent actually loves him and there was never a beef, on the stand this week, Capricorn Clark said otherwise. Clark said that she was at this press event at MTV with Diddy and 50 Cent was also there, all of this happening in New York. Clark said, quote, "After the interview wrapped up, myself, Puff, and Chris Lighty got in the elevator." Clark said that Lighty was an entertainment manager who, on paper, was managing Diddy at the time, but was also 50 Cent's manager at the time. Prosecutors asked Clark what happened in the elevator, and she said, quote, "Puff told Chris, because they were having some sort of issue, like, I really don't like all the back and forth. I don't do that. I like guns." The prosecutor then asked, "What's the issue with an individual?" And Clark responded, he had an issue with 50 Cent. She said Combs was very serious when he said that. In this case, it has become common to hear testimony from witnesses about alleged threats by Diddy. In fact, several witnesses have said that Diddy regularly threatened to fire people, to beat people, like his former girlfriend Cassie Ventura, and in this case, making a threat involving firearms to settle a dispute per the testimony of someone who was one of his closest associates for more than a decade. Invoking gun violence and some sort of veiled threat, that could be scary for some, but apparently not 50 Cent. On Instagram, 50 posted right after his name came up in the courtroom, quote, cut, wait a minute. Puffy's got a gun? I can't believe this. I don't feel safe, with a picture that looked like an AI image of 50 Cent on a movie set looking serious. And he wasn't done. Shortly after that, he posted another AI image on Instagram of him in a Yankees hat with a very scared look on his face with the caption, "Oh my goodness, itty bitty Diddy wants me dead. I have to lay low." Sad face emoji. "I think I'm gonna hide out at the playoff game tonight, LOL. Then the next day he posted what he did that night. He went to the NBA playoff game between the New York Knicks and the Indiana Pacers in Indiana. And you can see him here in a picture on the floor in a shirt that reads, quote, "Free Diddy," playing into the trolling that 50 Cent has done to Sean Combs over the years, even before Combs was ever accused of what he is on trial for. Now, Combs' trial is expected to last another month at least. He's charged with racketeering, sex trafficking by force, and transportation to engage in prostitution. He has pleaded not guilty. Join us now to talk more about the trial of Sean Diddy Combs and everything that's going on inside the courtroom is Afi Patterson, civil and criminal defense attorney. Thanks for taking the time to be with us. We're focusing on what was a minor moment in the grand scheme of everything we heard in the trial this week.
with posture, with mockery, with attempts to dominate the conversation instead of explain it. That's usually a sign that the ground underneath someone isn't as solid as they want it to look. When power is secure, it doesn't need to shout. But when a story threatens to reframe the past, insecurity shows up fast. Defensive energy replaces confidence, dismissal replaces denial, and suddenly, a project that could have been ignored becomes a battlefield. What people are really watching is a fight over narrative ownership, over who gets to decide what the public remembers and what it forgets. For years, that control stayed tight, carefully managed, but once an outside platform steps in, that grip loosens. And once control loosens, fear creeps in. The feud being dragged into the open wasn't accidental, it was strategic. If you can't kill the story, you try to drown it, turn it into noise, turn it into entertainment, turn attention away from substance and toward spectacle. That's why it got
week, but there's this anecdote that Capricorn Clark told about what related to 50 Cent, but what Diddy allegedly told 50 Cent's manager at MTV during her time of working for Diddy. What did you make of that? Sean Combs saying, I don't like the back and forth, but I like guns.
I think it goes to the overall case. They've been saying that Diddy was a dangerous guy. If he made a threat, he could back it up. And I do recall reading that she said that his demeanor was very, very serious. And knowing the history, knowing his history, his violent history, knowing about the beef between Biggie and Tupac, I think that it probably frightened her. And I think that just again, her knowing about his violence, his propensity for violence, his behavior with her, his behavior with Cassie, his behavior with other employees, he's just continually in reinforcing that violence. So I think it was a really good moment for the government.
Yeah, it's just, and it seems like there are these little moments along the way where there are some celebrity names that pop up. This case, it was 50
Mhm.
Cent. We heard earlier in the trial, Usher and Neo were at a dinner where Cassie was allegedly assaulted. It was unclear whether they saw that, but it
Mhm.
was said that they were there. As far as the history of 50 Cent and Diddy, do we know how it started? I know that 50 Cent had a diss track, I think around 2006, claiming that
Mhm.
Sean Combs knew who killed Biggie Smalls, but is there a particular incident that happened that made 50 Cent just seem to really start to come at Sean Combs?
I don't know what's ground zero for them. I've seen, interviews that 50 has given saying that it's all business with them. I know they both have alcohol lines, and I know, they're both from New York. I think 50 is maybe from Queens and Diddy is from Harlem. I don't know what their ground zero is, but I know that since this since this all came out, 50 has not stopped. He's been taunting Diddy online. You, of course, know about the documentary. I believe it got picked up by Netflix, and he is supposedly donating the proceeds to victims of domestic violence. Diddy has had his knee on his neck and his foot to the gas on Diddy for a while, but again, I don't know where it started.
Yeah, I mean, 50 Cent, for many people, if it was ever, there was an anecdote that came out that someone had said, oh, I like guns when talking about a back and forth, it might scare you. 50 Cent was at the
Mhm.
Knicks Pacers game in Indiana with a free Diddy t-shirt on, sitting courtside the next day. That's
Was
just,
he?
it's different. It was, yeah, it was different.
Mhm.
I look back and we aired a bit kind of leading into this interview, a clip from the Breakfast Club. It was 2018 and Diddy was on the show and they asked about the issues that he had with 50 Cent. And he said, there's no issues. I love him. He loves me.
Mhm.
He was kind of joking about it. And then you hear these stories that come out, whether it's this one specifically
Mhm.
about 50 Cent or just in general, the picture that's being painted by the government in this trial. For you, has kind of the image of Sean Combs and who you thought he was, has it changed during the course of what we've seen over the last couple of weeks?
Certainly over the course of what we've seen, but I think I've seen an interview where 50 said, if you want to go nowhere, go to Diddy. If your career, if you
personal fast. Old resentment doesn't need much fuel, it just needs permission. And this moment gave both sides permission to say what they'd been holding back, even if they said it indirectly, even if they wrapped it in jokes, sarcasm, or bravado. The public reaction only made it worse. Clips went viral, commentary exploded, people picked sides without even fully understanding the background. Once the audience steps in, the situation stops being manageable, every word becomes evidence, every reaction becomes part of the record. Silence looks guilty, speaking looks defensive. There's no winning once perception starts shifting. What's being exposed here isn't just rivalry, it's fragility, the fragility of images built over decades. The fragility of reputations that depend on silence staying intact. The fragility of power that only works as long as no one challenges the version of events you prefer. This is why the outrage feels so intense. It's not about respect, it's about control slipping away. Dragging the feud into the
You're ready for your career to die, go to Diddy. It's long been rumored that Diddy didn't necessarily treat his artists properly, and if you look through his roster of artists, you'll see a lot of individuals whose careers probably started off really, really well, but they ended up with no money. That's long been the rumor. There've been rumors of abuse by Diddy toward Cassie and toward Kim and some other women as well. Even when he was at, I think Uptown is where he originally started. So there have always been rumors, but nothing really solidified and verified like we've had in this trial. It's been awful. I think it would be awful for anyone. I don't think his reputation is in the business world certainly will never recover. And even if he's found not guilty, his name is mud. I don't think that it's recoverable. I think everybody is extremely shocked, especially just some of the sexually explicit things. We have a huge morality issue in America. So anything that's like a little deviant is just not going to be really good for you. So I think everybody's a little shocked. I'm a little shocked and appalled and horrified, and I think a lot of people are. But this is not what we knew. We knew some things weren't right, but we didn't know just how wrong they were.
And I feel like we just knew because, I mean, we all grew up, whether it was, some of the roles he had in movies, and I mean, he was everywhere, and then his brands were everywhere. And it's like Making the Band was such like a hit show on MTV back in the day. And there's that famous scene where he has all the contestants walk to Brooklyn to go get, I think it was Junior's cheesecake. And he's yelling at people. And then it seemed like everyone around him in any documentary that he did, it was like, oh, that's just Puff because he's always just so angry. And then it's just this whole other level in the trial where it just, as an attorney, I mean, how effective has the government been as you just read, and we can only read transcripts really and kind of hear from the people we have in the courtroom, but just at this point, how effective has the government been in painting the picture of this isn't just someone who was a domestic abuser, this isn't someone who was just a mean boss, but this was a racketeer who was running a criminal enterprise.
Yeah, and I think the forced labor issue. I think they've done an excellent job with that. With the transcripts I've been reading, a lot of the people are saying that they worked for 20 hours. Like that's the magic number, 20 hours straight. They, on a good day, we heard you'll get 4 hours of sleep. On a bad day, you'll get 4 hours of sleep. I think one of the what is it? A bodyguard said, if you sleep, you're getting fired. Like it was more rhythmical or rhythmic than that. I don't know, but you couldn't sleep around him, and I think that's what we saw with Making the Band. But again, we really didn't believe it. We thought it was for entertainment purposes. We didn't think someone could really act like this. And if an employee gave any pushback, they would either be terminated or they'd be threatened with reputational damage. They would be threatened with being blackballed, or they actually would be blackballed. And I think the government is doing an excellent job of proving forced labor.
And on that forced labor part, because on one hand, and I found it interesting, like George Kaplan, who is a former personal assistant for Diddy, like detailed all these, witnessing the abuse, he said, of Cassie. And then he was someone who would start work at 9:30 in the morning. And I think he said sometimes he went home at 7 o'clock in the morning the next day.
Spotlight wasn't about settling anything. It was about reclaiming dominance in the only way left, public pressure. If you can't own the narrative privately, you try to overwhelm it publicly. But the modern spotlight doesn't work like it used to. Once something is out there, it never fully goes away. People will revisit it, reinterpret it, combine it with other fragments, build their own conclusions, and those conclusions don't ask for permission. That's the part that scares powerful people the most. This situation also shows how thin the line is between confidence and ego, between strength and insecurity. The louder the response, the more it signals that something landed too close to home. Truly unbothered people don't need to prove it. They just move on. Instead, what we're seeing is escalation disguised as humor, aggression disguised as indifference, a public war framed as entertainment, but driven by something much older and much deeper. Years of tension don't disappear just because people stop talking about them. They harden, they calcify, and when something cracks that surface, everything underneath rushes out. The streaming project didn't create the feud.
Quote, Sean Combs should not be in jail for this conduct. In fact, he may be the only person currently in a United States jail for being any sort of John, and certainly the only person in jail for hiring adult male escorts for him and his girlfriend when he did not even have sex with the escort himself. Over the last 75 years, the White Slave Traffic Act has been limited to defendants who cause interstate travel for financial gain through the business of prostitution. That Sean Combs remains in jail for being convicted of being a customer of consensual adult sex services makes this case truly exceptional. Not only is prosecuting the users of adult prostitution services inconsistent with the Mann Act, it's inconsistent with the prosecution policies of the district attorneys of Manhattan and the city attorney of Los Angeles, California, two of the three locations where this prostitution allegedly took place. In addition, Mr. Combs is incarcerated while everyone else involved in this identical conduct, his girlfriends, the cowboys, the agency leaders, the porn stars, and others, walk free, as they should. If there was ever a fact pattern that was exceptional under the Mann Act, it is this one. And then they move on to another argument, that the Department of Justice, the DOJ, has usually only charged Mann Act violations when there's financial gain. And they even cite a number of cases in the Southern District of New York, where Combs was prosecuted, that apparently involved defendants that set up a prostitution business for profit. Again, trying to distinguish between Combs' conduct and these cases. He never did any of this for profit, they argued. And they even cite the 1953 U.S. Attorney's Manual that says, quote, as a general rule, prosecution should not be instituted in the so-called non-commercial cases. And they claim the Department of Justice manual today, quote, makes clear that the prosecution of customers involved in an 18 U.S.C. 2421 offense, like Mr. Combs here, is now limited to prosecuting those who engage in commercial sex with victims of sex trafficking, in addition to those who otherwise perpetrate or facilitate human trafficking offenses. And in the absence of any sex trafficking charge, however, it is clear that the standalone Mann Act counts never would have been prosecuted. That seems true. I think you ask any legal expert, they will say if all the government had against Sean Combs was the transportation to engage in prostitution charges, just the prostitution charges, they probably wouldn't have gone after him. They coupled it with racketeering and they coupled it with sex trafficking. I agree with that. I don't think that they would have gone after him just for that. Anyway, the defense highlights how modern day prosecutions of Johns is really when you're talking about exploiting vulnerable foreigners who don't speak English well, which again is not the case here. And they highlight how the only potentially comparable case in New York is where you had a retired police officer and a former judge who apparently hired women to have sex with a male fraternal group called the Jesters. But Combs' attorneys say, while there was no profit there, there's no profit here, there was sex trafficking of those prostitutes. That's what's different. Again, Combs was acquitted of sex trafficking in this case. And here's the main point, quote, moreover, the cases which involve defendants similarly situated to Mr. Combs have been released on bond pending sentencing. In reviewing the cases across the country where the primary or sole conviction was for a violation of...
It exposed it. Because now the audience wasn't just watching, they were judging, reinterpreting old interviews, digging up forgotten moments, rewriting timelines, turning speculation into certainty. The story grew beyond the people at its center. And that's when it stops being manageable. What's being exposed here isn't just rivalry, it's the fragility of constructed images, the truth that no matter how untouchable someone seems, they're only one uncontrollable story away from scrutiny. Power built on perception is powerful until perception changes. The ugliness comes from the refusal to adapt, from clinging to old tactics in a new environment, from believing intimidation still works in a space where everyone has a voice and nothing ever truly disappears. The public doesn't just remember what you're accused of, they remember how you respond when challenged. They remember whether you lash out or stay composed, whether you deflect or reflect. Those reactions become part of the record too. And in this case, the reactions spoke loudly. What should have
of 18 U.S.C. 2421, the defendants who were not charged with running a prostitution business have been released pending sentencing. And then Combs' attorneys make another argument for why Combs' conditions are exceptional. And it's about him being locked up at the MDC. They say that a district court judge in the Southern District, in another case, basically said how bad the MDC is. As Judge Furman noted, the state of affairs at MDC is unacceptable. In so noting, Judge Furman concluded that the conditions in the MDC qualify as exceptional reasons under the statute justifying, and this was the defendant in this case, Chavez's continuing release. Judge Furman found that the conditions at the MDC are, quote, dreadful in many respects, but three warrant particular emphasis. 1. Continued reports of inordinate periods of lockdown. 2. Claims that the facility provides inadequate and or substantially delayed necessary medical care, a particular risk in this case. And 3. General issues about the conditions at the facility. These conditions have not abated in Mr. Combs' detention at the facility. As the court is aware, during Mr. Combs' incarceration at the MDC, the facility was subject to an interagency suite that was designed to achieve our shared goal of maintaining a safe environment for both our employees and the incarcerated individuals housed at MDC Brooklyn. They're actually quoting what the rationale was. In other words, there is a significant issue at the MDC related to the safety of employees and incarcerated individuals that require outside law enforcement action from multiple agencies to address. Importantly, MDC, as a jail, has a significant law enforcement presence within its walls 24 hours per day that are equipped with investigatory and often unregulated authority. Thus, the requirement of outside law enforcement agencies to ensure safety within the MDC is an admission that serious violence, mayhem, and chaos is occurring within the MDC that requires more than a Band-Aid raid, but rather surgery. Indeed, we are aware of ongoing threats of violence and actual violence in the facility such that Mr. Combs' safety is constantly at risk. And they go on to argue, though Mr. Combs has been a model inmate for his nearly year-long period of confinement, the violent conditions are still very much a concern for Mr. Combs and is an unnecessary confinement risk given the clear precedent of multiple similarly situated Mann Act convictions where defendants were released on conditions. Now, the government, by the way, would probably disagree with that statement of him being a model inmate. Remember when they accused Combs of trying to arrange three-way phone calls and buying the use of other inmates' phone privileges to try to make sure the government wasn't listening in, that he was having these private conversations, that he was allegedly trying to contact witnesses in the case, that he allegedly orchestrated a birthday campaign to help his public image while he was locked up. So if we hear a government response, I'm sure they're going to say something about that. Then the defense highlights he's not a risk of flight, he's not a danger to the community, which, by the way, I think are real key points here. But they seem to echo a lot of the same arguments that they have already stated to the court. And remember, they haven't been successful in the past. That he voluntarily came to New York last year to surrender himself to authorities, that he gave up his passport to his attorneys 6 months before his arrest, paid off his mortgage on his Miami home so it was free and clear for him to stay at.
Then a moment of distance turned into escalation. What could have faded turned into a standoff. Pride took the wheel. Ego blocked the exit. This is the cost of unresolved tension. It doesn't stay buried forever. It waits for the moment when exposure becomes inevitable, then demands payment with interest. Eventually, the headlines will move on. They always do. Another controversy will replace this one. Another spectacle will capture attention, but the damage won't fully disappear. Cracks don't reseal once they're visible. This situation will be remembered not just for what was released, but for how people behaved when control slipped away, for how quickly old rivalries resurfaced, for how little it took to turn tension into open hostility. There's no real winner here, just exposure, just loss of mystique, just confirmation that power doesn't equal immunity. It reminded everyone that history doesn't vanish just because it's inconvenient, that silence isn't the same as innocence, that controlling the present doesn't erase the past, it only delays the moment when someone else decides to revisit it. This is why the outrage feels performative and panicked at the same time. It's a scramble to reassert authority in a space where authority is no longer guaranteed, where platforms don't answer to individuals, where audiences decide what matters. And audiences are ruthless. They don't care about legacy the way insiders do. They care about story, about conflict, about authenticity. Even if it's messy, the more someone tries to shut something down, the more interesting it becomes. That's the paradox. Dragging the feud into the spotlight may feel like control, but it often accelerates loss of it, because now the focus isn't on the project anymore, it's on behavior, on reaction, on what people say when they feel cornered. And those moments are hard to walk back. No matter how this cools off, it won't reset things. Too much has been revealed, even indirectly. Too many people have started connecting dots. Too many narratives have cracked. This isn't about winning an argument, it's about surviving a shift in perception. The spotlight doesn't just illuminate, it exposes, and once it's turned on, you don't get to decide what people see.